The music stops. 80,000 voices fall silent. Michael Jackson's hand trembles on the microphone. His sequined glove catches the stage lights as tears stream down his face. He can't continue. The king of pop, the man who never breaks, is breaking. Right here. Right now. In front of the world. The orchestra hangs in suspended silence. The backup singers freeze. Security guards step forward, unsure. In the third row, a small figure in a wheelchair reaches up toward the stage. The child's oxygen tube glints under the arena lights. Michael sees him. Their eyes meet. And everything changes. This is that moment. The moment that redefined what it means to be human on the world's biggest stage. How did we get here? What could possibly make the most professional performer of all time stop mid-song and break down in tears? The answer will change everything you thought you knew about Michael Jackson. It was July 16, 1988. Wembley Stadium, London. The Bad World Tour was at its peak. Michael Jackson had conquered every venue, broken every record, and performed for millions of screaming fans across the globe. Tonight was supposed to be just another show. Another perfect performance. Another night where the King of Pop proved why he owned that title. But backstage, something was different. Michael sat in his dressing room, the familiar ritual of preparation taking place around him. Sequined jackets hung on racks. The famous glove waited on its velvet cushion. Makeup artists applied the final touches. But Michael's mind was elsewhere. Earlier that day, he had received a letter. Not from a record executive or a Hollywood producer. From a mother. A mother whose 7-year-old son, David, was losing his battle with leukemia. David's dream, his only dream, was to see Michael Jackson perform live. The doctor said he had weeks, maybe less. The letter was simple. Please, Mr. Jackson. He just wants to see you sing Heal the World one more time. Michael had arranged for David and his family to have front row seats. VIP treatment. The full experience. But as showtime approached, something gnawed at him. Something deeper than just making a sick child happy. This felt different. This felt like destiny calling. 5 minutes to places, Mr. Jackson, came the voice through the intercom. Michael stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the stage. The roar of 80,000 voices hit him like a physical force. This was his element. His kingdom. His sanctuary. But tonight, he wasn't performing just for them. He was performing for David. The show began exactly as rehearsed. "Wanna be startin' somethin'?" exploded from the speakers. The crowd erupted. Michael moved with his signature precision, every step calculated, every spin perfect. For the first hour, it was vintage Michael Jackson. Flawless. Electric. Untouchable. But then came the moment that would change everything. As the opening notes of Heal the World filled Wembley Stadium, Michael scanned the crowd. There, in the third row, exactly where he'd arranged, sat David. 7 years old. Bald from chemotherapy. Wearing an oxygen mask. But his eyes were alive with pure joy. Michael began to sing. The words he'd sung thousands of times before suddenly carried different weight. "There's a place in your heart, and I know that it is love." His voice, usually so controlled, began to waver. He looked at David again. The boy had removed his oxygen mask and was trying to mouth the words along with him. David's mother held him steady, tears already streaming down her face. The child's father stood behind them, his hand on his wife's shoulder, watching his son experience what might be his last moment of pure happiness. "And this place could be much brighter than tomorrow," Michael continued, but his voice cracked. The emotion was building inside him like a dam about to burst. But Michael Jackson, the consummate professional, pushed through. He had never broken character on stage. Never let his personal emotions interfere with a performance. Until this moment. Until David. The bridge of the song approached. The part where Michael usually hit his highest notes, with effortless perfection. But as he reached that moment, something unprecedented happened. Michael Jackson stopped singing. The backing track continued. The orchestra played on. But the voice that had captivated the world fell silent. 80,000 people held their breath. Michael's hand gripped the microphone stand. His other hand, the one with the famous glove, covered his eyes. His shoulders began to shake. And then, in front of the largest audience of his career, Michael Jackson began to cry. The tears came in waves. Years of pressure, of perfectionism, of carrying the weight of being the king of pop, all came pouring out. But this wasn't about his pain. This was about David. This was about a 7-year-old boy who would never grow up to chase his own dreams. This was about the cruel unfairness of a world where children suffer while adults play games. The music stopped completely. The entire stadium fell into a silence so profound it felt sacred. 80,000 people, witnessing the most famous person on earth at his most vulnerable moment. Michael looked at David again. The boy was crying too, but not from sadness. David was crying from joy. From the overwhelming emotion of seeing his hero, his idol, showing the same vulnerability he felt every day in that hospital room. And then, something magical happened. Michael Jackson stepped down from the stage. Security moved to stop him, but he waved them off. Still crying, still overcome with emotion, he walked directly to David's section. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Fans reached out, but Michael had eyes only for one person. He knelt down in front of David's wheelchair. The stadium's massive screens projected the moment to every corner of Wembley. Michael took off his famous glove and placed it gently in David's small hands. "This is for you," Michael whispered, though the stadium's acoustics caught his words and broadcast them to the world. "You're braver than I'll ever be." David clutched the glove to his chest and whispered back, "Sing for me, Michael. Please." Michael nodded, tears still flowing freely. He returned to the stage, but everything had changed. When he began, "Heal the world," again, his voice carried something it had never carried before. Raw, unfiltered human emotion. Pain and hope intertwined. The sound of a man who had just remembered why music exists in the first place. Subscribe right now and share this story, because what happened next will stay with you forever. The entire stadium began to sing along. 80,000 voices joined Michael's trembling vocals in perfect harmony. But they weren't just singing the words. They were singing for David. They were singing for every child who was fighting battles too big for their small shoulders. They were singing because sometimes, music is the only language that can express what the heart feels when words fail. David, still clutching Michael's glove, sang too. His small voice, weakened by illness but strengthened by joy, rose above his oxygen mask. His parents held him close, knowing this moment would be seared into their memories forever. Whatever came next, they would always have this. They would always have the night Michael Jackson cried for their son. When the song ended, the ovation was unlike anything Wembley had ever witnessed. But it wasn't applause for a performance. It was applause for humanity. For the moment when a superstar remembered that beneath all the fame and glitter, he was still just a man. A man with a heart big enough to break for a child he'd never met. Michael finished the concert, but nothing was the same. The remaining songs carried a different energy. The crowd was different. Michael was different. He had crossed a line that night, from entertainer to healer. From performer to human being. But here's where this story takes an incredible turn that nobody expected. 3 weeks later, David passed away peacefully in his sleep. In his final moments, he was wearing Michael Jackson's glove. His mother later told reporters that David's last words were, "Tell Michael I'm singing Heal the World with the Angels now." When Michael heard this, he cancelled 3 shows on his tour. He attended David's funeral, quietly, without fanfare. He sat in the back of the small chapel, wearing dark glasses, grieving for a boy he had known for only minutes, but who had changed his life forever. At the service, David's mother approached Michael. She was carrying something wrapped in white cloth. "David wanted you to have this back," she said, offering the glove. "But he also wanted you to have this." She handed Michael a small, handwritten note. In a child's shaky handwriting it read, "Thank you for crying with me. Now I know it's okay to cry too. Keep healing the world. Love, David. Michael kept that note with him for the rest of his life. It was found among his most precious possessions after his death in 2009. Written on the envelope, in Michael's handwriting, were the words, "The night I learned what music really means." From that night forward, Michael Jackson was different. He established the Heal the World Foundation. He visited children's hospitals regularly, always quietly, always without cameras. He funded medical treatments for hundreds of sick children around the world. The glove he gave to David was replaced, but Michael never forgot the weight of that moment when he placed it in a dying child's hands. Years later, Michael would tell close friends that July 16, 1988, was the most important night of his career. Not because of the performance, but because of the breakdown. Because sometimes, breaking down is the only way to break through to what really matters. The video of that night, with Michael crying on stage and the entire stadium singing together, became one of the most watched concert moments in history. But those who were there say the video doesn't capture the real magic. The real magic was in feeling 80,000 hearts breaking and healing simultaneously. In witnessing the exact moment when the king of pop became something even greater, a human being who wasn't afraid to show his heart. Share this story if it moved you, because this is what happens when love meets legacy. Today, David's story continues to inspire. The Michael Jackson estate still receives letters from parents of sick children, asking for the same kind of miracle that happened that night at Wembley. And while Michael is no longer here to answer those letters personally, his foundation continues his work. Children around the world are still being healed, still being helped, still being reminded that it's okay to cry, and it's even better to hope. The original sequined glove that Michael gave to David was eventually donated to a children's hospital in London. It sits in a place of honor in the pediatric ward, a reminder to sick children that someone, somewhere, cares about their pain. Someone understands that behind every statistic, every case number, every hospital room, there's a real person with real dreams and real hopes. Michael Jackson sang about healing the world, but that night at Wembley, a 7-year-old boy named David taught him how to do it. Not with grand gestures or perfect performances, but with tears. With truth. With the courage to break down so that others can break through. The exact moment Michael Jackson broke down in tears while singing live wasn't his weakest moment. It was his strongest. Because it takes real strength to cry. Real courage to be vulnerable. And real love to put a child's need for hope above your own need to be perfect. That's the moment Michael Jackson stopped being just the king of pop and became something eternal. A reminder that the most powerful performances aren't the ones where we never miss a note, but the ones where we let our hearts sing louder than our voices. The music industry remembers Michael Jackson for his moonwalk, his music videos, his album sales. But David's family, and everyone who was at Wembley that night, remember him for something else entirely. They remember the night the most famous person on earth proved that fame means nothing if you can't use it to make one child smile through their tears. And in a world that often feels cold and disconnected, that's a lesson worth remembering. That's a story worth sharing. That's a legacy worth preserving. Because sometimes, the most important thing we can do is stop in the middle of our perfectly planned lives and cry for someone else. Sometimes, the most beautiful music comes not from our voices, but from our hearts breaking open wide enough to let someone else's pain in. That's what Michael Jackson learned from David. That's what 80,000 people learned that night at Wembley. And that's what we can all learn from the exact moment the king of pop became something even greater, beautifully, perfectly, gloriously human. But perhaps the most profound part of this story isn't what happened on stage that night. It's what happened in the years that followed. Every time Michael performed Heal the World, after that evening, he would pause at the same lyric where he broke down. Not to cry again, but to remember. To honor David's memory and every child like him who fights battles too big for their small bodies but not too big for their infinite spirits. Medical staff at children's hospitals around the world began reporting something extraordinary. Children facing their own battles would ask to hear the story of Michael and David. They found strength in knowing that even the king of pop understood their pain, That it was okay to be scared, okay to cry, and okay to hope despite everything.